Welcome, this is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com. You're tuned into Asia Pacific Perspective, the monthly series between myself and Broc West of APPerspective.net, where we go over all of the news that's fit to print and all of the news that they don't print about the Asia Pacific region and what's really happening on this side of the globe. So let's go back to Australia to our good friend Broc West for the 3 stories we have lined up for you this week. Broc, thank you again for taking the time to do this.
As always, a great pleasure, James, and looking forward to getting into the news. And this is the second episode of the Asia Pacific Perspective. And just want to thank all the listeners and audience out there who gave us such a positive response for the first episode.
Absolutely. And for anyone who did miss it, of course, you can find that in the archives there on CorbettReport.com, also linked up on my YouTube, youtube.com/CorbettReport, and there's also a post of it up on APPerspective.net. So lots of different ways to get this program, and I hope people do spread it out to other people. But let's get into the first story that we have lined up for people. Tell them about what we have ready.
James, this is a story that's kind of been reported for the last couple of days, and the cyber attacks that are going on between apparently China and the United States right now. We'll take this first story from antiwar.com, which is a great site that I recommend people go and check out on a regular basis. The headline is "The Great Cyber Warfare Scam." Just reading down here a little bit. The war party never sleeps. There are always new variations of war propaganda coming out from round the bend. With the coming of the internet, the last manufactured threat to rear its head is, of course, cyber warfare, which is now being touted by the Obama administration and its media fan club as the next big scary thing. But what are the facts? The first fact we need to integrate into our analysis is that cybersecurity isn't a science, it's an industry. That is, the entities issuing alarming reports of this lurking threat are for-profit companies mainly, if not exclusively, concerned with selling a product. And while the threat landscape, as the jargon phrases it, is potentially very diverse, with a number of countries and non-state actors potential combatants, our cyber warriors have targeted China as the main danger to our cybernetic security, the yellow peril of the internet age, as Obama coined it. They're stealing our technology, our secrets, and infiltrating our very homes. This is largely baloney, however, as Jeffrey Carr, founder of Project Grey Goose and the TIEA Global, a cybersecurity firm, and the author of Inside Cyber Warfare, points out. I'll just take a quick quote here. "It's a good business today to blame China. I know from experience that many corporations, government and DoD organizations are more eager to buy cyber threat data that claims to focus on the PRC, which is People's Republic of China, than any other nation state. When the cybersecurity industries issues PRC-centric reports like this one without performing any alternative analysis of the collected data, and when the readership of these reports are government and corporate officials without the depth of knowledge to critically analyze what they're reading, people become easily fooled into looking in one direction when we have an entire threat landscape left unattended." James, as I said, this story has been developing over the last week, with both countries on either side of the Pacific blaming each other against these so-called cyber attacks. And it would take a brave man to bet against this being the last time we hear of this kind of thing. This article really points out the flaws and the confirmation bias that's going on in the higher levels of the military-industrial complex on both sides. And despite the fact that these infiltrations really could be from anywhere in the world, it's just easier for these companies to make profits and point the finger at the political enemy of the month. James?
Well, exactly right, and this is a good article as far as it goes towards identifying that that type of scaremongering that's going on right now, and some of the economic reasons behind it, just as exactly as in the actual physical wars that wage around the world to the benefit of the military-industrial complex. Here we have this cyber war that's supposedly taking place much to the benefit of the cyber-industrial complex, which is starting to form around these new information technologies, and people have to understand it as the scam that it is in that regard. And of course, there's vested interests, huge, growing vested interests in hyping this war up and making it into more than what it really is. And you're exactly right also to indicate that it's very, very tenuous at best to say where various attacks are coming from, because such things can be easily spoofed by people who know what they're doing. So to say that it's coming from China is highly dubious at best. And in fact, yesterday I was just looking at a story that floated across the CNET newswire that I was looking for again today and found has already been buried, but basically saying that the latest round of cyber attacks that they're fear-mongering about didn't source from China, sourced from Eastern Europe. But for some reason, that story is being buried, and a fresh round of China fear-mongering is coming through. So I think there is that the economic reasons for this, but it's also important to keep in mind that just like every other supposed threat, this gives power to the agencies that then really stand to gain from this and to the grandstand on the back of this supposed enemy that's at the doorstep, and they get to increase the size, scope, and scope of what they're doing. So again, this is what a key part of the cyber warfare is about, and unfortunately, one of these attacks, one of these days, is going to get through the defenses and is going to wreak major havoc, and it is almost certainly going to be some type of inside job, but even if it isn't, as we know, it's going to be, there is an I-Patriot Act that is sitting in the wings, waiting to be unleashed, so that's another part of this whole cyber warfare thing that's going on right now, and China is really just a convenient boogeyman in this game for the US at this point.
Absolutely, totally agree. Speaking of organisations or groups that may benefit from this, there's an interesting side note that I've put there in the related articles there at the bottom of the page. And it comes from RT, is that apparently Anonymous, the hacker group Anonymous, has been somewhat instrumental in helping this cyber organisation pinpoint the sources of these attacks. James, you've always been somewhat sceptical of these heroic kind of Robin Hood type figures that are portrayed for us, example, WikiLeaks and Kim.com, for instance, and for good reason, I believe. Do you put Anonymous in the same kind of category?
Well, of course. I mean, what is anonymous? What is it? It's anyone who says they're anonymous is anonymous. So, of course, there are going to be real hacktivists out there who think that they're doing something great, but there's going to be government agents up the yin-yang because, of course, what do they want to do? They want to infiltrate and puppeteer these groups that provide the excuse for the crackdowns. So, of course, there are going to be government infiltrators galore in these organizations where there is no organization. It's exactly like Al-Qaeda. Whoever says they're Al-Qaeda is Al-Qaeda. Whoever says they're anonymous is anonymous. So of course you just put your own people in there. You get them to stage these types of attacks that do nothing in the long run. I mean, what has Anonymous done that has actually changed anything whatsoever in the scale of the political landscape right now? Absolutely nothing. And yet they are that convenient boogeyman that is going to be used as the excuse to crack down. So people have to stop putting their faith in organizations that aren't organizations at all, that are absolutely nothing, that are just smoke and mirrors, because that is spook central. You are looking at the intelligence agencies when you're looking at the face of, at least the public face of these organizations, and all it's going to be used for is to crack down on everyone online. So this is not something that I think people want to be involved in.
Absolutely not. And I do commend you in the as kind of one of the spearheads in the alternative media to keep a skeptical eye on these kind of organizations and groups like WikiLeaks, like Anonymous, you know. James, we'll quickly try and keep this moving here onto our second story, and this has pretty much been worldwide headlines ever since it happened, and that is, of course, the North Korea nuclear test. Now, I know you've been on RT already speaking about that. You did a great job, so I commend you for that. But this comes from Asia Times Online. The headline is, North Korean test shows US policy failings. Quote, with all eyes on North Korea since its third nuclear test, remarkably little has been said about how we arrived at this crisis point. Inadequately contextualized as North Korea's response to fortified UN sanctions, the latest nuclear test bespeaks the failure of US diplomacy towards its historic enemy. The commonplace US media framing the North Korea as a region's foremost security threat obscures the disingenuous nature of US President Barack Obama's policy in the region, specifically the identity between what his advisors dub strategic patience on one hand and his forward deployed military posture and alliance with regional hawks on the other. James, we've seen more of the same rhetoric from the UN and pretty much everyone else in the world since North Korea conducted this test. Unsurprisingly, the Obama administration and its allies are calling for tougher sanctions, which early kind of talk seems Russia and potentially China will oppose. But even if these new sanctions were imposed, it doesn't seem to do any effect to the North Korean regime anyway. With a lot of North Korea, I mean, it affects the people with already a lot of North Korean population living in horrendous poverty. There's still a lot of wild cards in this whole situation. South Korea has reacted by unveiling guided a guided missile system that they say can hit Pyongyang quite easily. They've deployed cruise missiles on the border. We've got the incoming president, Park Geun-hye, who will be sworn in the coming days as well. So that's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. Not to mention that there's also going to be two large military exercises between the US and South Korea. One's called Foal Eagle, and the other is called Key Resolve, which is going to be involving 20,000 personnel plus. So you can imagine how North Korea are going to react to that. Probably not well. And of course, there's also more talks, rumblings, murmurs, rumours of another nuclear test in the near future. So with North Korea being such an unpredictable factor here, James, I mean, is there any kind of real solution? Is there any kind of way forward here other than sanctions?
I don't think that that's even really a way forward, because as you say, I mean, all the sanctions does is starve the North Korean people more, and Kim Jong-un just continues to get fatter and fatter as the little pot-bellied dictator there. And one thing I want to warn people about is that I see a lot of the comments that have this childish mentality, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, so they're all, hey, Kim Jong-un, yay, go North Korea. That's just ridiculous sentiment in my view. I think we don't want to side with any dictator, whether that dictator be in Washington or Pyongyang or anywhere else. I'm equally against dictators everywhere, and I'm equally against the usage and testing of nuclear weapons anywhere by any regime under any pretense for any reason. And I absolutely deplore the nuclear hypocrisy that goes on with Washington and the U.S. testing nuclear weapons all the time, and of course actual nuclear weapons, not these little nuclear firecrackers that North Korea is testing that are half the size of the Hiroshima device. And that has to be pointed out. Absolutely, the number one threat to stability in the world is the US-NATO consensus and all of that. But that does not mean that North Korea is our friend. It does not mean that I'm supporting their regime or their dictatorial communist paradise of people starving to death and eating each other and everything. I mean, it's just ridiculous, the stuff that goes on in North Korea. And no one out there on the internet, internet tough guys, actually wants to go and live in North Korea. They just want to see apocalypse come, as long as it's in some other part of the globe. I don't want to see apocalypse come. I don't want to see these nuclear weapons being used by anyone, and I don't want to see any regime ever getting them or using them for any reason. So I'm not on the side of North Korea. I'm not on the side of the US. I'm on the side of free humanity, and I think we all have to be opposed to what's going on here, and we all have to do our part in the respective countries that we're in to make sure that our governments do not pull the nuclear trigger that unfortunately we're on the knife edge of here. And it's a scary situation, because really there are very few ways forward that don't involve some sort of conflict in the near future, and that's something that we can all look towards with dread, or we can actually try to do something about it. And I think supporting North Korea isn't doing something about it.
Totally agree, James. Well said. Just before we move on to the third story, I would just like to give a big hat tip to Noel Bowie and his recent article covering the whole issue too on his website, noelbowie.blogspot.com. It's a really great read, and we'll make sure to put it in the show notes for everyone so they can follow that up as well. For our third and final story, James, we're going to turn to an issue that seems to have fallen off the headlines a little bit, but of course it's in your backyard there in Japan. So, and that is of course Fukushima. So, why don't you tell us what you've got up on Fukushima Update right now?
Well, I've just posted up a story that just broke on Nature just earlier yesterday. Fukushima Health Survey Chief to quit post, and this article reads, after 2 turbulent years on the job, the head of Fukushima Prefecture's massive survey to understand the health effects of the 2011 Japanese nuclear accident is stepping down. Shunichi Yamashita, a radiation health expert from Nagasaki University, told Nature by email that he will leave his post at the end of March. The Fukushima Health Management Survey is an ambitious project to chronicle any adverse health effects arising from the 3 meltdowns at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant caused by the tsunami and magnitude 9 earthquake off the coast of Japan on 11th March 2011. The survey's goals include estimating the dose received by the prefecture's 2.05 million residents, thyroid screening of tens of thousands of children who may have been exposed to radioactive iodine-131, and understanding the mental health consequences of the accident. The article goes on from there, and they note some of the controversy that surrounded Yamashita in his time in this post that has resulted from his careless use of language language and insensitivity to the people of Fukushima, but they say he did a slapdash bang-up job of being this head of this Fukushima Health Management Survey, which has so far produced a rhetoric like what we see in the related post that I have linked up there to the West, to the AFP. The story, No Health Effects from Fukushima Japan Researcher. And this is talking about Kazuo Sakai of Japan's National Institute of Radiological Sciences, who is coming out and saying that since the accident in Fukushima, no health effects from radiation have been observed. Although we've heard reports some people fell ill due to stress from living as evacuees and due to worries and fears about radiation. So here we see the invocation of a meme, and I hope people have watched and are understanding how this meme is being applied, that the biggest effect of Fukushima has been the mental health effect. People have been so afraid of it that it's causing them health issues. So this is their latest ploy to try to stop people from thinking about any of the other possible health effects, such as thyroid cancer. And I've also got a post up on the front page of Fukushima Update right now talking about the thyroid cancers that are skyrocketing right now. They've found 3 youths under 18 right now in Fukushima with thyroid cancer, which is an unusual level. And supposedly they're now doing control testing in other parts of Japan to try to see if this is really unusual or if they're just uncovering more thyroid cancers. But again, this coming from the Japanese government, I'm not exactly holding my breath for an independent evaluation of what's going on here. What's your take on it from there in Australia, Brock?
Unfortunately, not a lot is going on in terms of news feeds coming from Fukushima. My heart does go out to the people there who are still struggling and, really do require our attention and constant support. And the third story down I see on Fukushima Update as well, coming from ABC Australia here, is that wonderful, glorious company known as TEPCO is apparently going to make people pay back their compensation. Victims of the disaster can be made to pay back the compensation they've received from TEPCO. What's going on there, James?
Yes, now they're calling it temporary compensation, which means that eventually it'll have to be paid back. So people can go for more of the details from ABC Australia there that has this report that just came up a couple of days ago. But yes, I mean, it's just absolutely the most ridiculous thing you can imagine, especially for what I would imagine is probably the most hated corporation in Japan right now, if not the world. TEPCO, which is really, of course, just the Japanese government, since the government bailed it out and has assumed ownership, or controlling ownership of the company. It basically is the Japanese government now, so of course they're working hand in glove, and they're going to want their money back. I mean, you don't think you're going to get that compensation money and be able to keep it? No, that's just to get you back up.
What if you're a company profiting from the reconstruction of Fukushima?
That's totally legitimate. Of course, you can keep all that money. But if you're a person who was actually thrown out of their home because of this disaster, oh no, absolutely not. Ridiculous double standards, obviously, and unfortunately, they say the government that you'll put up with is the government you get, and that's not saying a lot for the Japanese people at this point.
Yeah, and as Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is apparently globetrotting, having his first glorious visit with President Obama, so I'm sure, unfortunately Fukushima may not be the closest thing in his mind, and it really should be. So I hope that people will stay up to date on Fukushima Update for regular updates on this disaster and the outcoming news.
Absolutely, and I hope people will stay up with apperspective.net, of course, keeping its eye on the entire region and all sorts of stories breaking through every day. Tell people again about the website and how they can stay in touch.
Well, the website address is apperspective, all one word, apperspective.net. Also, you can keep regular updates via subscribing to my RSS feed and also on Twitter, which can be found at @AP_perspective. And also you can find me an email link, which is on the right-hand side of apperspective.net.
Excellent. Well, 3 more important stories coming out from this increasingly important region. I'm looking forward to our next edition. So, Broc West, thank you again for your time.
No worries, James. See you in March. Take care.